My wife left me when I was caring for my dying father, but when he left me a fortune, she came back begging. I'm 36 years old, married to Ale, 34, for 8 years, and we have 2 kids together. Life has had its ups and downs, but nothing could prepare me for what I'd go through with my wife over the past few years, especially when my father's health took a turn for the worse. My father, my only family besides my wife and kids, has been dealing with kidney problems for years. Recently, he's become so weak that he needs dialysis twice a week, and I made a promise to myself that I'd be there for him. For the past year, I've adjusted my routine to take him to his appointments, no matter what it takes. I'm lucky enough to have a boss who's supportive, so he lets me leave early every Wednesday to drive my father, and I work late to make up the hours. Saturdays are easier since it's my day off, so I take my dad without having to juggle work. But this routine has taken a toll, mostly at home. You see, my wife, Ale, has never been fond of my family, and this situation has brought that to light even more. At first, she was quiet about her disapproval, but the moment I made my twice-weekly commitment to my dad, she couldn't hold it in. She told me I was wasting my time on a man who would never appreciate it, adding that he'd never be impressed, no matter what I did. This hit a nerve, considering my dad and I had a complicated history. Dad was a successful businessman, and he always wanted me to follow in his footsteps. He was well off, and he assumed I'd inherit his business one day. But while I respected his work, I had different passions. I loved technology. I wanted to build something in the tech world, maybe even start my own software company one day. After high school, he pushed me to take up business courses, but I chose a degree in software development instead. He didn't stop me, but he kept asking me to join his business after graduation. When I didn't, he told me he'd give everything he owned to charity instead of leaving it to me. I didn't budge. I was making a decent income, bought a car, and bought my own home at 29. I was happy on my path. So I told Dad he could do what he wanted with his money. I wasn't in it for the inheritance. This upset him, and our relationship was tense for a long time. Then, 5 years ago, my mom passed away unexpectedly, and everything changed. Losing my mother was shattering for him, and it changed him deeply. Suddenly, my visits became a lifeline for him, and I began seeing him more often. My kids played with him, and we started rebuilding a connection. He eventually stepped back from his business and placed it in a trust. My wife didn't love this, though. Ale had never been close to my parents, claiming my mother was too nosy and controlling. So when my father officially cut me from his will, she criticized him and called it a cruel, unfair decision. I tried to get her to stay out of it, reassuring her that we'd be fine with or without my father's wealth. But she saw it differently. To her, my father's decision was a betrayal that would hurt our kids' futures too. Fast forward to now, with my father's health failing, and Ale is more resentful than ever about the time I spend helping him. She hates that I'm taking him to dialysis twice a week and uses every opportunity to disrupt my plans or guilt me for going. Saturdays, she always schedules something, hosting parties, cleaning the house, running errands that she insists I have to do. I've told her she can pick Sundays for any plans she wants, but she keeps piling things on me for Saturdays, only to scold me later if I don't manage to get to them in time. Wednesdays are even harder. I leave work early to take Dad for treatment, and then come home, planning to finish my work late into the night. But almost every week, Ale heads out for her own plans, leaving me with the kids to feed, bathe, and put to bed while I try to finish my work. Even though I've done everything I can to balance my responsibilities, she's constantly on me, making my life miserable over this. The sad part is, I know my dad notices. He's offered to go to dialysis with his nurse instead. Seeing that I'm always in a rush to pick him up, take him, and get back to avoid my wife's wrath. He even suggested once that he'd arrange another caregiver to take him every week so that I wouldn't have to worry about it. But he's my dad, and this is the last chance I have to be there for him. This drive is the only time I really get to talk with him, too. We used to chat about my childhood, his old stories, and his dreams for me, even if they didn't line up with what I wanted. But now, those moments are tainted. I'm constantly checking the time, anxious about getting back to face Aile's anger. Instead of enjoying that time with him, I'm speeding through traffic, taking shortcuts just to get back home sooner. After months of Aile's complaints, we had a major argument. She bluntly told me there was no point in wasting my time with Dad now that he'd given everything to charity, that he couldn't help our family's future. I was furious. I asked her if she only visited her own parents because they had something to give her. Her response stunned me. She said, "My parents did way more for me than your father ever did for you. They'd never abandon me like your dad did." Since then, it's gotten worse. Every Wednesday and Saturday, it's another fight, and she doesn't hold back, even in front of the kids. She's started speaking badly about my dad to our children, trying to turn them against me and him. I confronted her, telling her not to talk about my father like that in front of the kids. But she only fought harder, accusing me of abandoning my own family for a father who didn't care. It's a cycle I can't break. I've even caught myself feeling relieved on days she doesn't argue, but then she's twice as angry the next time. Now, I barely react, I just tune her out, hoping the silence speaks for itself. My father's illness has tested every part of my life, and while I can handle the stress of work, kids, and managing his appointments, Aile's anger has drained me. My dad sacrificed so much to build his business from scratch, and I know his dream was to pass it on. He didn't understand my choice, but that's his right. It was his business, his life's work, and I respect his decision to entrust it to charity if that's what he felt was right. But it hurts that Aile can't see this. She doesn't understand why I'm doing this, why it matters to me to spend these last moments with my dad. She's made it clear her support comes with conditions, and without the promise of wealth, she doesn't see the point of helping him. But for me, there's no condition, no inheritance needed. I'm his son, and that's all the reason I need to be there. I don't blame my dad for being angry with me. I had hurt him deeply, and in some ways, I think karma is finally catching up with me. These days, my dad's health is failing, and he's hardly able to walk on his own. It feels like life is making me see the consequences of my actions firsthand, as I now watch him struggle, weakened by age and illness. In the past, when I took Dad to his doctor's appointments or anywhere he needed to go, I'd wait by the car for him to come out to save time. I used to think I was efficient, but honestly, I was being thoughtless. Now, it's a different story. I go inside, gently help him up, and walk him to the car slowly, trying not to rush. He struggles with shortness of breath, so I keep a slow pace, giving him time to breathe. When we return, I help him all the way to his bed, making sure he's comfortable. It no longer matters to me if I'm running late. What matters is that he feels safe and supported. Maybe these actions won't erase the pain I caused him, but they're my way of showing him that I care now, that I'm here for him when he needs me most. But not everyone understands my change in priorities, especially my wife, Aile. She's been growing impatient, and yesterday, she dropped an ultimatum on me. She told me to choose, either my father or her. I was stunned. I told her I couldn't abandon Dad, especially not now, when he's so fragile. His time might be short, and he deserves comfort in his final days. But Aile didn't care. she replied coldly. Make your choice carefully. I'll be with you for life. He won't. That was it for me. I looked her in the eye and said, if that's how you feel, I'd rather stay with my dad than choose a partner so selfish. Ale left that night, packing her things and slamming the door behind her. I didn't stop her. I needed space from her, and I sensed she needed time to cool off. In her absence, I was left to manage everything alone. The house, the kids, my job, and taking care of Dad. I thought it would be overwhelming, but a strange sense of peace washed over me. Without Ale's constant complaints, the house felt lighter, almost soothing. When she sent over divorce papers a few days later, I wasn't surprised, although I didn't expect it so soon. I signed them without a second thought and sent them back, surprised that she hadn't asked for custody of the children. That was my biggest worry, but it became clear that she had no interest in them. Her reaction surprised me. After receiving the signed papers, Ale called, furious that I hadn't begged her to come back. She was yelling, asking why I didn't even try to act like a man and make things work. Her mother even took the phone, berating me for not trying to win Ale back. It was absurd. She wanted a divorce, and I simply honored her decision. Why would I fight to keep someone who didn't want to be part of my life anymore? Ale's family has always been demanding, but her mother's comment about acting like a man made me laugh. I told them both that if Ale truly cared about our children, she'd have asked for them. She didn't even want them, she only wanted to be free. Her mother insisted that Ale was too young to carry the burden of children and wanted to focus on her life. I just thought, fine by me. I'm happy to raise my kids, with or without her. But I did feel a pang of sadness for my children, who were already missing their mom. My younger one especially felt her absence. Life was busy, to say the least, but I managed. A few months later, I decided to move with my kids into my dad's house. It was a suggestion from friends and family, and it ended up being a great decision. Dad now had company, which lifted his spirits, and my kids had their grandpa to play with. They'd missed their mother, but having a grandparent around softened that blow. Dad already had a full-time caregiver, and with a slight raise, she even agreed to help with my children. It was perfect. Dad's health stabilized a little, and seeing him laugh with my kids made me realize I was on the right path. But then came the inevitable. Dad passed away peacefully in his sleep. He went to bed after a day spent with my kids, full of joy, and never woke up again. The doctor said he passed away contentedly, which brought me comfort. Losing my last parent was incredibly painful, but I took solace in knowing I'd given him some happiness during his final months. My kids were heartbroken too, but they held on to the lessons Grandpa had taught them. He'd told them to be brave, to face life's challenges head on, and to move forward no matter what. Hearing those words from them made me proud they'd inherited Grandpa's strength. The week after his passing, Dad's lawyer contacted me to discuss his will. I knew Dad had intended to leave everything to charity, and I was ready to honor that. But to my surprise, the lawyer told me that Dad had left his entire estate to me, his house, his business, everything. I was overwhelmed. After all I'd put him through, he'd never stopped believing in me. I'd expected he might have updated his will, but the lawyer told me that Dad had never changed it. I was his only heir from the start. I was in tears, thinking of all the times I'd let Dad down. The lawyer comforted me, saying Dad was proud of me for following my passion, even when it meant turning away from the family wealth. Dad had admired my courage. With a newfound resolve, I decided I would honor his legacy by taking over his business and continuing what he started. Word soon spread about my inheritance, and suddenly, family and friends who'd vanished years ago began showing up. eager to reconnect. Even Ale and her parents reappeared, acting remorseful and claiming they hadn't known about Dad's passing. Ale hugged the children, saying how much she missed them. I asked why she hadn't come to see them if she missed them so much. She said she'd visited our house but found it locked, which sounded like a lame excuse. Her parents chimed in, suggesting we reconcile for the sake of the children. I laughed, telling them it was too late. If Ale truly wanted to be with her kids, she wouldn't have left. But then, Ale's demeanor shifted, and she became insistent, saying she'd been hurt that I hadn't fought for our marriage. I saw through it all. She wasn't here for the kids or for me. She was here because of Dad's money. When I called her out on it, she got defensive, saying she wanted her rightful share of the inheritance. My lawyer later assured me that since the divorce was finalized before my inheritance, Ale had no claim. But he did advise me to be cautious, suggesting that Ale might try to file for custody of the kids later, just to secure financial support. I was relieved to have his guidance and knew I needed to be careful about letting her back into my kids' lives. Since then, I've focused on rebuilding my life. Taking over Dad's company has given me the freedom to balance my work and personal life. My kids are adjusting, and we're planning a vacation to the Bahamas, a dream I'd never managed to make happen before. It's not about spending the inheritance, but finally having the time and stability to give my kids a break. They've been through a lot, and so have I. This vacation feels like a fresh start for us all. As for Ale, she hasn't reached out again, but I wouldn't be surprised if she's visiting every lawyer in town, trying to find a way to claim some of Dad's wealth. But I'm not worried. I have the children with me, the family I care about, and the business that Dad built. In the end, I'm the one who stayed, and I think that would make Dad proud.